Ready? Okay, Corey, you're first.
My name is Corey Tomchek. I am running for, obviously, the 29th Senate seat. I'm 59 years old. I've run a business for 32 years. So keeping it running for 32 years, I would call that successful. I've been through multiple economic cycles. I've watched presidents and governors come and go. And I've survived all those changes. One of my other unique qualifications is that I've been married for 39 years, so my wife has decided that the training is holding and that she'll hang on to me. I've been married longer than either of these gentlemen have been alive. I am the old guy up here. Why I'm running is because I'm sick and tired of watching Republicans get elected and then flip-flop change their views once they get to Madison and are either exposed to media pressure or Republican establishment pressure and not holding on to their conservative or Republican values. I believe in citizen legislators. I think that actually having political experience may be a detriment, especially in this election cycle. So I'm stepping up. It's kind of my put up or shut up moment. I've been fairly vocal about my opinions about the political scene, and it's my time to step up and provide some leadership. And that's what I'd like to do. So, thanks for the opportunity today.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us. My name is Brent Jacobson. I'm from the city of Mosinee. It's been an honor to have served as the mayor of Mosinee since 2015. I was born and raised in Mosinee. I'm 38 years old. I lived there with my wife, Tessa. We'll be happily married here shortly for 7 years. And we're blessed to have an almost 6-month-old at home. In fact, the day of the primary, she'll be turning 6 months. So we're very blessed to have her. And as I mentioned, I've served as mayor of Mosinee since 2015. We've done some tremendous work in the city of Mosinee to move that forward, improve our downtown and expand our business park. I've also been honored to serve on the Marathon County Board for a term. I largely, unfortunately, had to spend that term defending common sense and conservative values against the different wing of the board. And also outside of that, I have a full-time job. I'm happy to be a part owner in a law practice in Stevens Point. I've been practicing law for over 12 years now. And I have a great group of partners in Stevens Point that I work with and been very supportive in this. I'm getting into the race because it's time for a change. And it's time for a change at the governor's chair. But also remember that the legislature is the body that drafts the laws that get to the governor for signature. So you need a legislator that's not going to just take votes. You need a legislator that's going to stand up, speak out for conservative values, take policy, craft it into legislation, get it signed. That's how things get done. So I do think government experience is beneficial. It's been an honor to start at the local level, and I hope to carry that with me into Madison if I'm fortunate enough to get your vote and the will of the voters on August 9th.
Thank you very much.
I'm John Kaiser. I was born and raised in Ingram, about 10 miles north of the Taylor County line. I now live in Ladysmith. I run a couple businesses. I'm an investment advisor with my independent firm, J. Kaiser Management. I'm also a third-generation realtor with my family's business, Kaiser Realty. I also run a event promotions company called JK Productions. I put on 2 music festivals, Northwoods Country Rally and Northwoods Rock Rally, which is in Glum, Florida. Combined economic impact of about $1 million in Rusk County, which is a big impact to our local area. I also serve on the Ladysmith Area Industrial Development Corporation, where we bring in manufacturers to our industrial park. Just this past year, we brought Henry Repeating Arms and Centerline Architecture to our industrial park. We're actually full. If a new industrial business needs to come to Ladysmith, we'll need to build a suit, which I'm very proud of. I also serve on the Flambeau Valley Arts Association, very musically involved. We just brought in Glenn Miller Orchestra last month to Ladysmith, which is probably the biggest artist to ever play in Rusk County, with over 30 Grammy Awards. I'm running because northern Wisconsin needs a voice, and we need to bring common sense down to Madison. This seat has been held by someone from Marathon County for a long time, and I figured it's about time someone from the northern part of the district comes down to represent us. There are a lot of issues, forestry, agriculture, mining are things that I'd like to address. We have 4 discovered and viable mine sites in the 29th Senate District. 2 of them are in Rusk County, one of them is here in Taylor County, and one of them is in northeastern Marathon County. If we can build a central processing facility somewhere in the 29th District and get the east-west rail line between Ladysmith and Tomahawk back online, we can have a boom similar to, an economic boom similar to what they had in North Dakota with the oil boom in 10, 15 years ago. And that would be huge for northern Wisconsin. I'd also like to address rural broadband. I'd like to address rural transportation issues. And a lot of these issues are things that need to be addressed by someone from northern Wisconsin.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our first question is, would you support changes to revenue caps on schools, counties, and municipalities to take into account inflationary and competitive pressures? And Brent, you're the first one on this one.
Sure. Well, there's a difference between revenue caps for school districts and shared revenue and levy limits for municipalities. Revenue caps for school districts are really a component of 2 factors if you think of them as a teeter-totter. It's the state aid, and it's also the amount that the school can raise local property taxes. And I would not support adjusting those caps because let's take a look back at where we're at today with the public school system. Even under Governor Walker in his last budget, I mean, he should be credited for investing in the last budget he passed over $600 million for K-12 education, and that wasn't enough. And then in Evers' last 2 budgets, he was able to convince the legislature through horse trading that we needed more money for K-12 education, and yet again more money for K-12 education because Governor Evers has lived his life in the public system, and his answer to every question is more money. And I disagree with that. And I'm certainly not going to support having school districts have to raise property taxes on their end and be the bad guy. Moving to levy limits, which affects municipalities, so your cities, your villages, your townships. Governor Walker froze those levy limits when he came into office in 2012. And you can adjust those if you have new construction in your community, which makes sense because you have more services to provide, new infrastructure in your community. But I would not support removing the freeze on those caps because I feel there's more that can be done at the state level to get more state aid in the pockets of municipalities. Because municipalities' 3 largest sources of revenue are number 1, property taxes, number 2, general state aid, and number 3, general transportation aid. Those all go into the same pot. Just because you get $1 for transportation doesn't mean it necessarily gets used on that. And I feel that for too long, the property taxpayer has bared the burden when the state really can do some things to get more aid in the pockets of our municipalities so that we don't have to remove the freeze on levy limits and make the mayor, the city council, the town chairperson have to turn to their property taxpayers for more revenue. So I would not support changes in revenue caps or levy limits.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, John, you're next.
Yeah, same thing. I agree with Brent. I would not support raising the levy limits or revenue caps. I think there's ways that we can adjust the AIDS formula, the equalization AIDS formula at the state level, the shared revenue formulas to benefit rural municipalities and school districts, especially. You know, I'm from the town of Richland in Rusk County, which is roughly 140 residents. The revenue that is brought in the town of Richland does not increase at the same pace that the costs do for grading, for gravel, for building roads. So we need to adjust the AIDS formula, but I would not adjust or lift the property tax freeze because we can't be taxed any more than we already are. And the state has the ability to adjust their shared revenue so that rural municipalities can fund their road projects.
Thank you.
One thing I agree with my opponents on is that Madison needs to provide more money back to the municipalities. But I would allow for levy limits to be changed. And the reason I would allow for levy limits to be changed is I trust local government more than I trust Madison. As I spoke the other night before the Towns Association, I said, if you want that responsibility so that you can fix things in your towns, maybe you need to increase your ambulance capabilities, or maybe you have road construction that's woefully behind because of the limits. Well, then you need to sell that idea to your taxpayers and then make them understand what plan it is. So yes, I would allow for levy limits to be changed, but that's a great responsibility that those towns and municipalities then have to live within. And wouldn't it be great if the citizenry was more active in communicating what their needs are and understanding what the finances are of those needs in the municipality, so that they understood their taxes rather than the complicated, convoluted formulas that come out of Madison. I think those adjustments need to be made, and we need to trust our local government more than we trust Madison.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our next question is, Wisconsin's rural areas are rapidly aging, and employers are struggling to fill positions. Rural areas have seen a population decline in recent years. What can the state do to encourage young families to choose to live and work in rural areas, such as here in Taylor County? And I believe, John, you're first. Yep.
Well, that's a great question. I'm actually someone that moved away to South Florida, and I found myself coming back home because there's nothing like northern Wisconsin. This is truly God's country up here. And a lot of people graduate high school and they never look back. They leave, they never look back. The one thing that we have here is our natural resources. Another thing that we have is cost of living here is extremely low compared to in a city. And we have amenities here to attract young people. If we can expand our rural broadband so that people can work from home. You know, we saw during COVID that a lot of people were moving out of cities and coming to rural areas that had good broadband because they had the ability to work from home. And a lot of these businesses are continuing that, and my fiance is one that she works half the time from home. And we can expand our capabilities of bringing people into our area if we can get rural broadband passed in northern Wisconsin, especially for rural areas. And I commend Mike Bubb for what they've done here in Taylor County, because that's a fantastic program, giving the residents of Taylor County the ability to work from home or start a business from home in a rural area.
One of the things I learned on the campaign trail was how far ahead Taylor County was of everyone else. And as John mentioned, Mike Bubb's efforts to bring broadband to the county, and it's a fantastic thing. Should be one of the models that every other county can look to for doing that. Because broadband is a big deal, especially to younger people. I mean, we still had to change the TV by walking up to it when I was a kid, when I was a young man. Now, you know, they can do it from their phone if they want to. So getting that broadband, getting that infrastructure built, I think is a key part of it. Some of it you're not going to change. 50 years ago when I was a young man, I left home. But when I started thinking about raising a family, I thought, yeah, Milwaukee's not such a good place. There's no yards, it's pretty cramped, traffic and everything that was going on even back then. And I decided to come back to northern Wisconsin. I think that we have to look at that as the drawback. Make sure we have the things in place, such as broadband, such as activities, such as building the community, so that people will say, yeah, you know what, back up there is pretty nice, and that's where I can plant roots. So that would be my advice.
Thanks. And, you know, I think I'll echo the same thing that my two opponents said about how great it is to live in central and northern Wisconsin. I too lived in Pittsburgh for some time, and it didn't take me long to think about when I got to that stage in my life where I too wanted to start a family, that it might not be the best place for it, and thought of how wonderful it was to grow up in central Wisconsin. So I packed up, moved back, and I couldn't be happier. I can't tell you how many times I think about how right a decision it was to make. And I think we need to market that as a state to a lot of our younger folks that have made the decision to move away about not only how great it is to live here, but the other piece is cost of living. Honestly, when I moved back from Pittsburgh, I did not have a very fancy apartment, and I had a 20-minute drive in Pittsburgh. It was a one-bedroom rundown apartment, and my mortgage on my first home was less than the rent on that apartment for 1 month. So I think we do have to market that cost of living. Broadband is also important. I agree with my opponents on the fact that we have to have the resources here for the younger population and to give them the ability to work. And the other thing I'll mention that was brought up in the assembly debate is affordable housing. I think that is critically important. And one of the things I'd like to continue to look at that I've actually worked on with Representative Spiros from my area is how we can adjust the tax increment finance laws to get affordable housing worked in to TIF districts so that when we have a larger manufacturer that might be interested, for instance, in coming to an industrial park, can we have a mixed-use industrial park to have affordable housing within that TIF district that would give developers tax credits, and especially in this environment where the cost of their materials is through the roof, encourage them to still build. So those are some things I'd be interested in looking at to grow our rural parts of our state.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Our next question is, would you support a reform in the appointment process for state boards to address nomination review delays and to clarify that positions with set terms of office become vacant upon the end of that term? I believe, yeah, Corey, I believe it's your first this time.
So that's an issue because of the current status of the DNR board. I don't think anyone paid attention to it before. Like so many laws in the books, there are little angles and little things to be played, and both sides are guilty of playing at that. Should that stuff be changed? Probably. Are you going to do it with a split leadership in the government or the governor's office and the legislature? Probably not. They're going to dig in on both sides. I would bet there's probably 10, 12 things that there's little hidden angles that when the law was written, no one took into account as things evolve. And I think you'll find that there's many, many laws that never accounted for the evolution of time and the change of society. So, yeah, it would make it cleaner. Am I happy about the current state of DNR? Yes, I am. Because I think that he's standing in the way of some radical changes that would not be good for anybody.
Well, and I agree with Mr. Tomczak's take on the, I'm glad that we have the individual in the DNR board that we do. And that actually transcends into other areas where I'm glad that we're at where we're at, because you can look at the UW Board of Regents, same issue. Governor Evers' appointees are not taking seat due to the recent Supreme Court ruling related to the DNR board member. I agree. I think the process should be cleaner. What that looks like, I think, is going to have to be a discussion. But we've had a system in place for a long time, and I'd also like to talk about Senate confirmations. For members of the administration, I think it's perfectly fine if the Senate's not ready to confirm an appointee, that they can hold back on that confirmation and realize that at the administration level, that doesn't mean the individual's not doing the work, doesn't have the job. He or she simply doesn't have the title. I mean, we still have secretary designees of Governor Evers in office collecting a check, doing the work. And if they're doing it fine, they're not going to face a confirmation process like the Ag Secretary did and end up getting fired. So we have a system in place with respect to administration appointees. I think it should stay that way. With respect to board appointees, maybe we need to have a discussion in light of the recent Supreme Court opinion, and I'd be in favor of exploring what the options are.
Yeah, I agree with both of these guys. I think you know, it's important that the legislature review appointees, whether it be in the administration or for board members. But it's important that the governor's appointees, whether it be a Republican or a Democratic governor, are not radicals in either direction. You know, and it's the legislature's job to review these people and review their qualifications and make sure that they're going to do a good job running the programs or being on the board that they're on. So I agree with these guys.
Thank you. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, miscarriages occur in 10 to 15% of all known pregnancies within the first 20 weeks, and ectopic pregnancies occur about 1 out of every 100 pregnancies. Would you support legislation to guarantee that women will have access to medical attention for miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies without them or their medical providers facing prosecution? And I believe John's, yeah.
Is it me?
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe you can start.
Yes, and I think I joined Governor, or hopefully Governor Clayfish's position on this, that, you know, medical treatment for anticipated miscarriage is not abortion treatment. And, you know, we should not be, you know, denying a woman access to treatment that is to address a miscarriage. And what I do think we need to do is we're going to have some serious discussions about the 1849 statute on the books to make things like that clearer, because, you know, I support the law on the books completely. It needs to be enforced. I'm not in favor of any exceptions to abortion, except for the life of the mother. And that being said, you raise a question. There is a myriad of other questions that 1849 statute may not address. And one of them, again, treatment for a woman anticipating miscarriage, that I do not feel is abortion treatment. And I don't think it would be prohibited by the statute that's on the books, but we should make it clear, because we're living in 2022, not 1849, and we have medical providers who are concerned about, am I doing something that's illegal or not? Well, let's make that clear for the medical providers so that they can go on with their job, provide treatment, and not have to fear prosecution.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I agree with Brent on that. You know, miscarriage procedure is not the same as an abortion procedure. We need to support women that are facing these difficulties. I think I'm 100% pro-life. You know, but at the same time, there's a broader conversation that needs to be had about pre and postnatal care, child care. We need to fix the foster care program as well. So those are the discussions that we need to have, but also reviewing the 1849 law to make sure that these issues, these gray areas that are being brought up, are addressed. So.
I'm trying to think of how I want to address it, because Mr. Jacobson said anticipated miscarriage, and you said a miscarriage procedure. A miscarriage is a miscarriage, and that's not an abortion. I didn't suffer as much as my wife suffered having a miscarriage, but that has nothing to do with abortion. A miscarriage is a miscarriage. It's an act of nature. That happens. If the law in the books is going to prosecute someone, well, because of that, that's a stupid law, and let's get rid of it. But a miscarriage is a miscarriage. It's not an abortion. Simply.
Our final question for the Senate candidates is there have been calls to make first offense operating while intoxicated a criminal rather than a civil offense. Would you support this change? Why or why not? And
It starts with me.
I think it starts with you, yeah.
So as someone that has had an operating while intoxicated, it was a mistake, and it was something that I deeply regret, but I've learned a lot from it, and I've taken full responsibility for it. I don't believe that it should be a criminal offense. I think where the issue comes is when people make the mistake 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Now you're talking about an addictive person. You're talking about someone that has a true problem that they need help for. So I wouldn't make it a criminal offense for the first time, but there certainly needs to be counseling after the first offense. People need to understand how that decision was made and how to prevent themselves from making that decision. And furthermore from that, we need to fund the Safe Ride program. In rural towns and counties, there is no Safe Ride program. You know, Russ County does not have that other than inside the city of Ladysmith. I know a lot of the other counties, Iron County, Ashland County, do not have a Safe Ride program that allows them to get from one side of the county to the other. And we need to be funding that program so that when there is a situation where someone is inebriated over the limit, maybe has been overserved, that those people can get home safely.
I would not change the first offense, but I would ramp things up. The second, third, how in the heck does anybody walk the streets with 6, DUIs or OWIs? That makes no sense at all. They have a problem and they need to pay for those problems, especially if they've injured or hurt someone during that process. By the grace of God, I probably haven't had one, especially as a younger man. I'm a little bit smarter now, just a little bit. But it needs to amp up as those things go. Those people that have multiples and don't learn the lesson, don't learn from that mistake, those people need to suffer more, is my opinion.
I'd agree with my colleagues up here that I think the first time offense should remain forfeiture, meaning non-criminal, with one caveat, of course, and so people understand when I think, for all of us, when we say that, I don't want to speak for the other two, but I think they would agree. That doesn't mean for someone who's caused bodily injury or harm on that first offense, that's a crime. Okay, that's not considered a forfeiture on the books currently, and I support it staying that way. Obviously, if there's bodily injury or harm in that first offense, that's a crime. And I also agree that we need to ramp it up though a bit after number one. 5th and 6th offenses, 5th and 6th. The legislature finally, actually Representative Spiros, who I've talked with a number of times on different issues like this, was a spearhead of legislation to make 5th and 6th mandatory incarceration. And we have courts that are abusing that law and not enforcing it because they're withholding prosecution or withholding sentencing. So they're withholding the imprisonment and they're on probation. Well, guess what? If they screw up on probation, it's actually up to the probation officer to decide whether to come back to court and ask that that person be incarcerated. I think we have to get on top of our court system and say start following the law. 5th and 6th means mandatory incarceration, not sentence withheld, and any of that stuff. So there are a number of things we can do to ramp it up and should be doing that. And just a spearhead off of that, I want to talk about marijuana too. I've fought heavily against efforts on the Marathon County Board to lower penalties for drug offenses for recreational marijuana use. I've represented clients who have been injured in car accidents by someone on the other side of the road who was high on marijuana. And I think we need to not only start looking at stuff with alcohol, but we need to seriously start looking at how we regulate drugs as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll give each of the candidates remarks and invite you to hang around and visit with some of the constituents afterwards. So, and I believe by the draw of Corey, you start with this one.
I'm the experienced choice that you have before you in the 29th district. I'm a strong conservative. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to be influenced by Madison. I'm going to be influenced by the people of the 29th district. I believe that my values align very closely with the people of the 29th district, and it would be my honor to represent them in Madison. Thank you.
It'd be my honor to represent you as well. As I mentioned during my opening remarks, I certainly have the experience in government. I started at the local level, which is where we need to start, and that's where government's most important. I've met so many great people along the way. I've learned a lot of their issues that actually overlap with state government, And I think that's important for someone to have as a base going into a job in the legislature, because a lot of the things we do at the state that overlap with local government affect you. They affect your property taxes, they affect your roads, they affect your benefits as seniors. I mean, I think that's all important, and I think that's why it would serve you well in the state legislature. And I also come from the private sector. I'm not just a government official. As I mentioned, I have a full-time job. I am an owner in that business. What happens with that business affects my paycheck, it affects the paycheck of a couple dozen people that we employ. And so having that private sector experience, I think, is also important. And I think I would serve you very well in Madison for that reason. And finally, Senator Petrusky, I consider a friend, and I consider someone who has represented this district very well since 2012 as a senator. And he did that for a number of reasons. One, because he was responsive, always checking in, always returning calls the same day, at least in my experience. And also because he wasn't afraid to educate himself on a topic he may not know much about. I'm not either, and I'm encouraged to do that and to do it to serve you well throughout the 29th Senate District. So I'd be honored to have your vote on August 9th and be your representative in Madison. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. This was a good time. I enjoyed the questions. Thanks, Brian. And we have a choice here in 10 days. I think all three of us would serve our district well, and I'm proud to be able to say that, because with all the nasty campaigns going on statewide, we have three solid candidates for the 29th Senate District. I've never run for political office before. I'd be considered probably a political outsider. But I have testified at city council meetings, county board meetings, in various capacities in multiple states. So I understand how government works, but I'm not a part of the bureaucracy, not a part of government. I understand that there's a lot of federal overreach, that we're not following the Constitution at the state and federal levels. And I want to ensure that our conservative values stay staunch. And we need a representative that's not going to compromise on our conservative values, but can get things done in Madison. And I believe strongly that I would be able to serve the residents of the 29th District. And like Brent said, it's important to be transparent. I've put my cell phone number on every one of my handouts. I want to be as accessible as possible. If there's any issue that anyone has, whether it be small or large, or something that they want me to tackle in Madison, I want to be able to take your call and address those issues, and that's very important to me. I'm the Northwoods representative, the Northwoods ambassador. I'm the one person in this race that lives north of Highway 29. I will be there for you here in Taylor County, as it's just down the road from me in Rusk County. So thank you all, I appreciate it, and hope you have a great day.